SD Access Bootcamp. This is part 5. Now we are moving to another big topic, which is policy creation within DNA Center. So why do you need policy? You need policy for your segmentation. And what happens when you define your policy? DNA Center take the policy information and then translate it into device specific configuration. So basically you express your intent and then DNA Center translate it for device configuration. Within DNA Center, you use virtual network, access control policy, and application policy for your policy framework. Two key concepts: scalable group and virtual network. Scalable group is assigned to an endpoint or a user based on how you authenticate and what kind of authorization profile you associate. By default, scalable group in ICE will be populated into DNAC once DNAC ICE integration is successfully configured, and also all the scalable groups are assigned to virtual network default VN, and we will see what is a default VN. So virtual network is a concept of VRF basically, which is used for macro segmentation. That means two SGTs in two different VRF, they cannot talk to each other. There are two default VNs available. One is default VN and another is infra VN. Default VN will be used for default purposes. However, infra VN we will use for access point. Now, we already tackled design. If we go to DNA Center policy, you can see few options. We are interested in group-based access policy, GBAP. This is the landing page. We have a couple of tabs here: overview, policy, security group, and access control. Few are implicit, like security group reflect all your SGTs. Access contract is like a ACL, that who can talk to whom on what protocol. And overview tab is like a landing page for all your policy snapshot. As you can see this warning, it says that if you want to use DNA Center as your GBP primary, that means you want to define all your policies from DNA Center, you need to click on start migration. What happened in that case? It make ICE as a read only for policy and give DNAC the full privilege to create policies and enforce policies. All right. Right now this is very vanilla. We have not created anything. If you click on policy analytics for security group, you will see that you will see the SGT flow. Once your DNAC is functional and you have the flows, you can watch the SGT flows, like which SGT is talking to whom in a Sankey chat. In policy right now, you can see there are a few SGTs listed as a source and destination matrix. Nothing is green or red. That means there is no policy configured. The SGTs what you see today, they all are default. They comes default, but we will create a few more. All right, and here is those SGTs. You can see on the left side we have the name and the tag value associated with that. You have description, and also all the SGTs by default they are parked in default VN, and there is no policy associated. Now you can click create security policy. As you can see, we have two VNs available, default and infra, but we are going to create more VNs because we want to create a dedicated VN for our corporate environment. We don't want to rely on the default one. So overview, policy, security group, and access control. In this demo, we are going to provide DNAC the privilege and makes GBP primary so that we can create all the policies via DNAC. As you can see, access contract, for example, allow DSCP DNS. This is a sample contract to allow DSCP and DNS. They are simple ACLs that say that permit SSH or permit bootp, that kind of thing. And you can leverage this access contract to enforce restriction between two security groups, say for example X and Y. So if you say X can talk to Y, but you want to go specific and just say SSH, you can use the access contract. So let's create a couple of security groups. We are going to We are going to simulate a corporate environment. That means we will have few security contexts like managers, developers, architects, etc., PCI server, mainframe server, etc. So let's create some security groups. We call it manager. You can change the tag value. Let's leave the tag value default. And since we have not created any default VN, we will park it in default VN for now. When we have our own VN created, we will take this SGT and assign it to the new virtual network. So it's like order of operation thing. You can create your VN first and direct, and then start creating security group. Here, what we are doing, we are creating the security group first, leave it in default VN, and once we have our virtual network, we will move this SGT from default to the new one. So we created an additional one, a new SGT called manager. Now we are going to create another one, say developers. And you see the tag value is incrementing by 1. Last time it was 18, now it's 19. But I'm getting this error. It says the security group with the name already exists. Though the tag value is different, but if name is not unique, it will not accept. That means you cannot have duplicate name for SGTs within the same VN. So we already have developer. Let's create architect. Let's create one or two more. You don't have to remember this. When at the very end, when we create the policy, you can see the policy metrics and it will make things much more clear. So we created something like mainframe, PCI server, successfully added security group, new security group been added. Now this is our ICE. Let's go and check in ICE work center, TrustSec component, and see if we have new SGTs reflecting here. As you can see, total is 16. And we created a few new ones like managers, architect, but I don't see them here. So what happened? My DNAC and ICE is already paired, but still SGTs are not syncing. Let me try to refresh. These 16 SGTs, they are default. They comes by default in ICE, and that's what you were seeing in DNS Center side. Now let's start the migration. During migration, changes on policy may take place in both DNS Center and ICE. A data backup is recommended. So when you want to do this migration, read the migration rule to understand a bit more. So what happened when you start this migration? What happened with security group? What happened with policy and the contract? So please pause the screen, give this document a read so that you can understand it better. Okay, I'm not reading it here, but I'll highly advise you to please read this document. Now I feel safe to start migration. Started migration. Migration is in process. So right now you cannot create any GBP or policies. Okay, migration is completed. Now let's go and check. All right, you can see now from 16 we have 21. Let's see. Yes, managers started reflecting here. All right, so new SGTs are being reflected. Policy setting, manage GBP is Cisco DNA Center policy. Okay, so ICE will be read only. So right now, this is what we have. Cisco DNA Center is the primary for all my policy and ICE is the read only. Now let's go and change this because all my authorization and other things will come from ICE. So I want my ICE to work as primary for policy setting. I was hoping to see something in migration logs, but there is nothing. All right, let's fall back. So we created SGTs in DNA Center and then we did the migration. Now we fall back to DNA Center again. Okay, this is additional setting, analytics setting. Just curious, what is this workflow? As you can see, configure group data connector. You have ICE and Stealth Watch. I do not have any Stealth Watch integrated, and I have ICE already configured. And we will talk about telemetry in other videos, like what happened when you update telemetry or enable telemetry. But this is good document. Give this a read. So we'll back out of this. We don't want to implement any stealth watch and all. ICE is already configured. PX grid services is already enabled. So we are good. We'll just say done. This was not related to our policy, but just wanted to show you out of curiosity. All right, so far we have created new security group contexts and they all are in default VN. And ICE and DNAC both have the same picture of SGTs. So that is good. All right, now it's time to create new virtual network. Virtual network are, as I mentioned, they are like VRF in network context, so that you can segment your physical network into multiple logical network. Within a virtual network, user and devices can communicate with each other unless explicitly blocked by an access policy. So if you are part of the same VN, you can talk, but if you apply a access policy, you can restrict. There are two virtual network available or created by default during DNA Center installation: default VN and infra VN. Infra VN will be used for wireless access points. This approach of segmentation is called macro segmentation. All right, now let's look at the SD access policy. Once XD access policy has been segmented into virtual network, you can define security policies. DNA Center will allow you to deny or explicitly allow traffic between groups within a virtual network, as again, microsegmentation. Okay, and we'll go ahead and create these policies. So now you know what is SGTs and what is virtual network. Let's look at the documentation, because if you do not know where to start, it's always best to go to help and pull up the documentation. I wanted to create a virtual network. If I do not know from where to start, look at the documentation. It will give you a fair idea how to perform certain action. Like you can see, DNA Center workflow, I can do create virtual network and it is available as a workflow, or you can go to DNA Center policy and create a virtual network. So both way you can start. It's like a from workflow, it's a quick start, or otherwise you can just always follow the drop down. As you can see, there are two VNs already available. Preview new SD access page. So let's see what is available in new layout. This is specific to 233X. The new virtual network menu, centralize and enhance. So they have made a nice changes in UI. I'm just scrolling through it, and if you want, you can just pause the screen and read through it. Because as you start building your network, it it can grow very quickly. Different object and what is the relation between object, they can go into disarray. So that's why time on time Cisco make this kind of like a UI changes, which make uh, make information present in the better and coherent format. I hope this new change is good. So we read through everything, and this is our snapshot page. So we can see how many virtual network we have. You can double click. So these are two layer 3 VNs I have tied to the Fabric Global. And again, layer 3 VN ID 4098, 4097, and RT or RD. So this is most like uh, IP MPLS, MPBGP, where we use RD, RT kind of construct, similar concept. We do not have any layer 2 virtual network, and we have not created any cast gateway. And we will talk about any cast gateway uh, uh, in the future videos. All right. So today you can see I have two layer 3 VNs, and I want to create one more. So what I can do, I can initiate the workflow from here, and there is something new available for layer 2 switch access. We don't want to go into that yet. So let's go ahead and create our workflow. These workflows are uh, very useful because it's a guided workflow, and they tell you what kind of information you have to put, and at the very end you get your required construct. So we are going to create a new VN. We call it corporate VN, and then you can assign it to Fabric site directly, but we have not built a Fabric yet, right? So let's not uh, get ahead of our planning. We'll leave the Fabric blank, and you can always come back and append. Okay, something wrong? You selected multiple Fabric site in one hour. You need to configure traffic exit setting. Again, we have not created any Fabric, and we have not created any border node or a extranet configuration. So let's see what's going on. Select your Fabric site, configure traffic exit behavior. Okay, so our workflow failed because we have not selected any Fabric. Let's see what we can do to work around that. So we are discovering a lot of order of operation thing because we are doing it from the scratch. Okay, my workflow, since I exit out of it, it was still sitting there, and it didn't work it didn't do anything. It was like a workflow which is in draft state. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say hit create, and it will create the object. So many a time you will see that when you perform a workflow in this new release, you are hoping that by the time you are out of that workflow, your object is created, but it's not. You have to go back and hit create, then only the actual action happen. Right now what I will do, I'm going to just delete the existing workflow, and here what I did, I created a guest VN. So we are going to create two VN. One is guest and one is corporate. I already created a guest VN. Now let me create a corporate here with you. So we are just repeating the workflow. As you can see, we do not have any site. Go next. It says site unavailable. All right. We have seen this. Let's see if it is a showstopper, right? Summary. Create your virtual network. This is the name. Last time I had a typo, so I deleted that workflow. And now you can see at the end of that workflow, this is kind of like a dormant workflow. Now I have to come here and say create. Only once I hit create, the intent will be converted into network device configuration, And now we have the corporate VN created. If I go back, your current progress will be saved automatically. So if it is saved automatically, let's exit. No harm, we already performed the create action. Now if you go back, now you see we have two coming as a default. Now we created two more, and if you double click, this is your corporate virtual network layer 3 VN. It has a layer 3 VNAD and a new RD and RT, which is 1.40 100. If you want, you can delete from here, and as you can see from the action, you can add fabric. So the fabric uh, absence or presence of fabric side was not a showstopper. You can always come back and edit the VN and add the fabric site. And that's what we are going to do actually in our lab. All right. Now, so we have new L3 VN created. What we will do, we will bring some of the SGTs from default VN. We'll port it over to the new VN, what we created. So let's see how we can do that. Because VNs are for macro segmentation. That means anyone in corporate VN, they won't be able to talk to anyone who's in guest VN. But now we want to enforce micro segmentation, and for that we will need SGTs inside our virtual network. Again, for that I have to do the migration, because I want to create or edit SGTs. Racing policy data now. All right. This is my eyes. Within eyes trust center component, here you can see I have manager and the as part of default VN. But as you can see, I cannot make any changes from ICE side because ICE is read only. So far DNAC and ICE have the same view. Every time you create a new context, you may have to hit deploy in a brownfield network, but for greenfield it's fine. As you can see, all I'm doing is editing the SGTs, uh, deleting default VN and applying corporate VN, and we will repeat for all our SGTs here, like manager, developer, architect, PCI framework, what all we created some time back. We are just moving it from default VN and assigning it to the new layer 3 VN. In a brownfield network, please make sure that if you ended up creating a new SGT, you may have to hit deploy so that it will be pushed to the switches. But this is greenfield deployment, so we are good. We do not have to say deploy yet. And that's all what we are doing. We are just deleting default VN and choosing corporate VN so that SGTs are now part of new layer virtual network. I think one more left, which is mainframe. Many a time this repetitive task, I'm just masking it. That means I'll show you one and I'll pause the video, finish up my task, and to save some time, because our discussions are already getting lengthier. Here you can see all my SGTs, they are now part of corporate VN. So you would have avoided this if we had created virtual network first and then come to SGT. So maybe a tip next time when you are building a network, you can choose to create virtual network first and then come back, create your SGT, and during SGT creation, you can choose the right VN, which kind of makes sense, right? You want to plan your macro segmentation first and then come and start planning or thinking about micro segmentations. All right, now we move to ICE. Let's go and see if ICE is in sync or is in agreement. Yes, ICE is in agreement. The changes what we made in DNAC side, they all are reflecting within ICE. That means ICE can see those SGTs are now part of new VN. Let's fall back because at the end of the day, I want ICE to enforce policies. So I'm always making ICE engine as active. As you can see, Cisco ICE will be administrative point of contact for all policies. Okay. But we created policies from DNA center side. So we created VNs, we created SGTs, everything we did from DNA center side. Okay. Now let's look into access contracts. Okay. So we are going even granular between our segmentation strategy. That means uh, who can talk to whom based on the protocol level, not just like permit any or deny any. Okay, if you go to ICE, TrustSec component, SGACL, you can see the name is allowed DSCP DNS, but actual ACL content is just like iOS. That means you have bunch of permit and deny statement with protocols. If you want to create a new one, this is how you can create. In ICE side, now we are back to DNS center. Again, we want to configure policy from DNAC, so we will do the migration again. So you can see the flip-flop, and I am doing that intentionally so that every time we create things or context in DNAC, fall back and see if ICE can see it, and so on. So now let's go ahead and create access contract. If you want to read about access contract, the Cisco documentation or the help document is your uh, is your friend. Please give it a read. If you want to specify a network resource that can be accessed by a user on a specific protocol, then that's where access control policy come into picture. All right, migration is complete and we have looked through the document. So there are few SGACLs already available like permit IP, deny IP, DSCP, DNS, like some normal one. But if you have any custom requirement, you can create access contracts, which is shown in right hand side. And these are just like default SGTs. These are default access contract. Create new. So this is how you can create new. Let's create an access contract which allow communication only on SSH traffic. An SSH is well-known protocol or application, so you can easily search for it. You can enable login or you can disable login. If you want to see the failed or success event, you can enable login, but it kind of like increase resources. So be mindful about that. The default action is deny. So you only permit on SSH, anything else will be denied. Again, sync is in process. And for brownfield kind of implementation, you have to say deploy so that it is pushed to the switches. All right. Now since we have macro and micro objects or constraint created, now we are going to define actual policies. So you come to policy, say create policies. Within that, you can select what is your source and what will be your destination. So we are saying that within corporate VN, I selected source as manager. Hit next. And I'm just making it up because of this is our lab and destination as mainframe. So managers cannot talk to mainframe. That's what we are saying. Access contract. You can use a existing contract or you can use a new contract. Okay. Contract selected is deny IP. So we are using existing contract. It's pretty self-explanatory. We are saying that if source object group is manager and destination is mainframe, don't allow the access, that is deny IP. So any user or endpoint authenticated as manager, another endpoint or user authenticated as mainframe, they cannot talk to each other, though they are in the same VN, same corporate VN. As you can see in policy view, I can search and this is the view I can see. So as you can see, everything denied is shown in red and this is a matrix and you can read. I hope it's kind of like easy to read the matrix. So you know that wherever is red, that means the communication between that source and destination is broken. One is in orange or gray, that means it is allowed, somewhat allowed, that is SSH only, and if it is a permit IP, that will be represented as green. So different shades: green, all allow all, red deny all, and then orange or gray for some level of access. You can hover over this and you can read the policies. Like developer can do developers are deny IP to manager, developers has deny IP to PCI server log and all, right? So this is our policy. This is what we are going to use for our lab work. Please pause your screen, maybe take a screenshot. This will come handy when we start creating actual authorization policies and policy set in ICE. Okay, now let's go to ICE and see whatever policy we created, are they reflected in ICE? So you can come to ICE TrustSec policy and look at the same uh, view as like DNA Center. Here you can see the same view and it will pretty much the same thing, but you can look from the ICE side as well. Here you go. So you can see some of the ACLs and SSH only ACL. This is what we created at DNAC side, and now it is reflecting in ICE as well. And we have the commands which goes into network devices, that is already created. Though we just said SSH and it translated into device configuration. What do we do next? Since we do not have any uh, active directory, so we need bunch of users and endpoint who can connect to network or fabric and authenticate themselves and become manager, architect, or inherit one of the constraint, right? So for that, what we are going to do, we are going to go to ICE and create several identity group, and we'll create identity group users. So I'm creating a couple of groups like developer, manager, and then I'll start creating actual users and park them in the group. So we finish ID groups. Now we can go to work center, network access, identities, and endpoints are only for MAB, but for .1x authentication, we will create identities. So right now I do not have any static endpoint created, but if I decide to do any MAB authentication, like a printer which doesn't have a .1x supplicant, we will add that MAC address here, and so that it can do MAB authentication. Now let's go and create a few users and park them into identity point groups, because identity point groups are the construct we are going to call in policy, and you will see that in next video. So I'm going to create a few users and park them into identity point groups. Like my first user is Mike, and since it starts with M, let's park it under manager so that it's easy to remember. So I'm going to create 2 users per identity group, and this is what we created: Amit, Andy, Dave, Donna, Matt, Mike. That means architect, developers, managers. And next, what we are going to do, we are going to create, and this is, you can see all identity store. This is the identity store sequence. That means first it will check internal user, then it will check active directory, and then it will check guest user. So this is what we are going to use in next video. Now we have users created, we have an identity group created, and next video what we are going to do, we are going to start creating ICE policy set. That means authentication, authorization policies, and authorization profile. So stay tuned. And if you come so far, congratulations. I know sometimes it's building SDA from scratch is lengthy task. It can be overwhelming, but if you are sticking to me, thank you so much and congratulations. I'll see you in the next video.